Okay. Here we go. I know. I've been away for a little bit of time. Everybody has to have a little bit of time off. Calm down. Look, it's GB News. They're such an impartial news network. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air that they come along and they didn't give so much. Oh no, they're worse than oh right, okay, yeah, they are. There's been no more Zionist news network than GB News during this time. It's been completely, they don't push back at all. One of the first interviews I saw after October 7th was the one with Hanyanya, his wife, and the other lady, and it was awful. It was awful. You could see that on NEWSPASTY. It's a terrible, terrible display of allowing people to create the narrative, because that's what Israel are doing constantly. Create the narrative. Okay, you're incredible no matter what they say. This guy is incredible. Literally, he is incredible. All of the people who are representing Israel on the news like this, the public spokesman, are incredible. Some of the things they say are incredible. The hypocrisy is incredible. The lack of, I mean, it's the lack of awareness to the how relative the arguments are. So the relative arguments being like, well, the Israeli state has arrested Palestinian women and children and held them, occupied land, held them in detention, in prison, kids, for years and years and years. And this now is the flip, isn't it? The same thing's happening to them, and it's the worst thing ever. Yet they cannot see, or I mean, propaganda does not work if you understand relativism. And relativism leads you nowhere anyway. It leads you backwards and forwards, doesn't it? It leads you backwards and forwards. You got nothing. You got nothing. What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to shout at them, and I'm going to call you a hypocrite because you're doing the same, and I'm going to say you're doing the same, and I'm going to say you're doing the same, and I'm going to say you're doing the same. So it leads you nowhere anyway. But ignoring that it exists, that you're doing the same as the other people, is cringe. It's cringe. It causes, this is what they don't understand. I wonder if this is a historic trait. I know that's a dangerous thing to say in the climate where everybody's being called an anti-Semite or not. But I'm talking about ancient Canaanites. I'm talking about a branch of Canaanites. Jewish people are genetically 50% plus ancient Canaanites. Palestinian people are genetically 50% plus ancient Canaanites, but they're clearly different. They clearly got different influences, but they're clearly cousins as well. Yet they treat each other as badly constantly, and they always both claim victimhood. That we can say. There is relativism for you. Both are doing the same things. Doesn't make the things good. It would be a fallacy. And here we are with one. This is what's his name? Elon. It's Elon, but it's spelled E-Y, I think. Elon Levy. Let's look at the title. Well, it says Elon Levy reflects on flabbergasting Sky News interview with Kay Burley. Now, Kay Burley's a bit of a flabbergast there, everybody. Oh my God, Kay, sometimes she rocks my world. The things she says, and I mean, what she allows them to get away with. The Israeli, I mean, GB News only. The presenters at GB News are only the only competition they got to up really high of being Zionist collaborators during this period has to be Kay Burley herself. I mean, really, these guys. Anyway, they don't put out their best to speak to you. They put out the people who are most trained in propaganda. What does that mean? They're going to lie to you. Let's listen to them lie. Let's hear how much GB News pushes back. Or are they just trying to score points over a competing news network? Let's find out on this NEWSPASTY with me, Johnny Vedmore.
This is heartbreaking. We're talking about 240 hostages, including 30 children, who have been held in a dark tunnel now by the terrorists who massacred and raped their way through these people's communities.
Right, okay, right, right. They massacred and raped their way through the communities. Well, they did massacre their way through the communities. Um, the rhetoric, of course, is hot, isn't it? Well, all these people have been held in a deep, dark tunnel. The tunnels that they have had a hard time producing these tunnels. So far, they produced basements that were there previously, like hospital basements. Look, this is a tunnel. Oh, it's a basement. Yes, but down, if you look, there is a door and it leads to the hospital. Yes, that's still a basement. I mean, these guys are special, but still, you know, this is the scene. He's setting the scene. So this is how propaganda works. He wants you to feel sad. He wants you to be on their side. He wants you to feel like, how can a human possibly feel anything but repulsed by the idea of young children, babies, rape, murder, and being held in tunnels? How can anybody, you know, argue against that? And that's the point, isn't it? How can anybody argue against those arguments? How can people argue against them? Because it's hard to argue against them, isn't it? Which is why they use them as arguments.
On October 7th, and every minute that Hamas continues to hold our hostages in the dark and keep their families in the dark is an ongoing crime against humanity. Now we're doing everything we can to get them.
Again, every moment, Palestinian children and women are being held in prisons all over the place by Israelis. It's a crime against humanity. And how do people respond to that? October the 7th. How do people respond to that sort of the barbaric nature of the past 75 years? October 7th. That's how people react. I can't stop them. Just because I say it's true and it happens doesn't mean it's my fault. Doesn't mean it's your fault. You should be able to say, if you torture people over a 75-year period, they might massacre you. I'm just saying, not agreeing with it, don't like it, not a big fan of the massacring. I prefer if people get on. But as a messenger, don't shoot me. I got to tell you, there's pasty all over the place. As you see, he's from the National Pasty Diplomacy Directorate, the Pasty Minister's Office.
Home. There is a deal in place to secure the release of the first 50 hostages. We're starting with the women and children, and we hope to continue and bring home all of the hostages, the men and the women, the old and the young, the soldiers and the civilians. We're committed to leave no one behind in the Gaza Strip.
Apart from the people you're bombing, apart from the people you're that are going to be collateral damage in amongst the 3,000 dead children. Oh my God! I mean, massacre. A massacre. What's bigger than a massacre? If a massacre is 300 people, what's 3,000 children? This is what I mean by the relative arguments. You know, Hamas hold them in tunnels. They've killed over 10,000 people in bombing, and they weren't Hamas. The majority weren't Hamas. That's beyond war crimes. The guy you're looking at is selling you that. That's what he's selling you. That's okay. That's what he's there to sell you. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with Hamas. You have to agree with kidnap. You have to agree with rape. You have to agree with murder. You have to agree that he's selling you propaganda.
What have you made of the British media coverage from what you've seen?
Here we go. Internal attacks, British media.
It really depends, and as a government spokesman, it's not my job to give a telling off to specific media outlets, but I think it's fair to say Israel hasn't been given a fair shake in this conflict.
Oh, yeah. They haven't been given a fair shake. They got wall-to-wall blanket coverage about the horrors of October the 7th, and then a load of people saying, hey, calm down, don't go too fast, and then the horror of everybody watching as they went too fast and they killed women and children. Okay, then it's hard, public opinion, it's hard when you're going around murdering women and children to keep up a smiley, happy face, you know, and have people look at you and go, oh, you're really good people. Even the worst and the most corrupt media will have to question that eventually.
We've done about 150 interviews, television and radio, since
Fair
this
shake.
war began, and sometimes I'm really flabbergasted by the questions I get. We're trying to present our side of the story. We're explaining why we're having to fight this awful war.
Did you hear that? They're trying to present outside of the story. The narrative setting people who are centrally involved in the affair and have been for 75 years and trying to, I mean, that's just laughable.
We're telling the truth about the October 7th massacre. We're talking about the lengths that we are going to bring our stolen children back. And sometimes, no matter what facts...
Okay, you're explaining the lengths you're going to. What? The 10,000 plus people who have been you've slaughtered to bring back the children, to bring back a smaller amount of children. You killed how many children? So they say it's like 3,000 plus. I really hope. I don't even like hearing those figures or repeating those figures. I'm thinking they might be true. I can't imagine. Can you imagine that? Can you line up? Can you do the thought experiment? Can you do it now? Can you line up? Look, over there, there's say 300 Israeli people, and over there there's 10,000 Palestinian people, and they equate as the same life force. That group of people, like, you choose one or the other, or you choose both, or you choose to kill. But it's just, and don't get me wrong, if Hamas had Israeli weapons, can you imagine what the death count would have been? But that's not the way it is.
We present, there are people who will always twist it in a way that makes Israel out to be the baddies, in a way that really requires intellectual somersaults and gymnastics.
What, the fact that you lied about there to be in tunnels under the hospital, it seems, lots of lies about a lot of the situation, the clearing of the place, the murder. It is really hard to see how this guy can keep a straight face.
To try to pull that off. But we have to continue telling the story, why we are fighting this war, the war that Hamas declared on us with the...
Yeah, well, I think the war's been going on for 75 years. I think he knows that too. There's a lot of pasty here.
The 7th massacre, and why we have no choice to win, because we can't go back to a world in which the terrorists just over the border, the army of terror just over the border in the Gaza Strip, can hurt our people ever again.
I think you were alluding a little bit to an interview with Kay Burley earlier today.
I was speaking to a hostage negotiator this morning. He made the comparison between the 50 hostages that Hamas...
Again, here we go. Okay, so it's a bit glitchy. This video's, I'm sorry, this video's a bit glitchy. This is just what it is like on GB News. That's just the quality of GB News. And they're obviously playing this cast. You can see this is lower quality as well. And they're replaying Sky News. They're like, oh, we could get an attack in. They've become like attack dogs attacking each other, or attacking internal media organizations. So GB News has set itself as being the alternative. But the only alternative is we'll show you how much of an alternative we are by attacking the other people. So we're the alternative because we attack them. Yet we'll still pump the same things down your throat and the same fear, yet pretend we're your friend. In a really, really obvious way. I mean, the vaccine stuff, they had people going, oh yeah, you should be be able to speak about these things, and putting on really weak people who don't speak about them that much and pretending they're speaking about it, and at the same time pushing out fear porn news about numbers in pandemic. So keeping people watching it and then scaring them. It seems like an operation that, oh, we can't capture this part of the audience because they have gone to the independent media. Let's become a little bit independent by attacking internally. And it looks just like brothers and sisters again, Canaanites fighting each other.
To a hostage negotiator this morning, he made the comparison between the 50 hostages that Hamas has promised to release, as opposed to the 150 prisoners that are Palestinians that Israel has said that it will release. And he made the comparison between the numbers and the fact that does Israel not think that Palestinian lives are valued as highly as Israeli lives?
That is an astonishing accusation.
How did that make you feel?
No, it's not an astonishing accusation.
Really.
It's not an astonishing accusation because there is massive discrepancy in every statistic, every single number. The number of people Israel killed to the number of Palestinian people of Palestinian origin who kill Israelis. The difference in numbers every year is extraordinary. The difference in this is extraordinary. You see it. They've killed 10,000 people in response to a few hundred. And a few hundred is not to belittle it. It's to say that that's how many people were killed. And then they see, okay, well, that means that we've got to take more life. Oh, the same thing happened. What was, I can't, Gilad, I can't remember his name. The soldier who was released. One soldier released, and they released, Israel released thousands. Wasn't it over 1,000 hostages got released from Israeli prisons? The fact is that a lot of these people who are being, and I say hostage because a lot of these people being held in Israeli prisons are prisoners of war who aren't being treated as prisoners of war and who don't get fair trials. They're looked down upon, they're seen as something else, and they're not as bad as they're being made out to be. And so there's loads of them that they just shouldn't be there. So it's easier to give them away as well. But the fact is that this is the situation in a place of occupation. You occupy not only land, you occupy services too. Occupy prison services, police services, defense services, armies, all of this. Occupy.
I've given many interviews, and that was the first question that left my jaw on the floor. The idea that since Israel is releasing 150 Palestinian prisoners convicted of violent offenses in exchange for 50 hostages, that somehow means that we care less.
Violent offenses, little kids who throw stones and stuff like this. I mean, it is insane. It's insane. Really
about
sad.
Palestinian lives, because that is the deal that we have agreed to. Obviously, if we could do a one-for-one swap, that would be preferable. Obviously, if we could get our innocent hostages back for free, all 250 of them, 50 days ago, nearly 50 days ago, that would have been preferable. So,
and if you could have done a war and only killed the same amount of people, that would be preferable. And that's the relative argument. That's where relativism leads you. Oh, and if we had done this, and that would be preferable. But that's not how it was, because we just decided to bomb and murder and do it indiscriminately and just blame, there was one Hamas leader over there. Yes, but you've killed 300 people in one bombing. Yes, but there was one Hamas leader, and so what? He's hanging around amongst other people. No evidence, nothing. I mean, some of the propaganda that's been pushed out is awful. And yes, we all know this isn't a secret. You know, everybody is aware that these people in power in Israel, not the Israeli people, but these people in power and Zionists in general, look down upon Palestinian people. They are worth less. We know that. So this guy is lying straight to your face. He knows it.
The idea that you take Israel's willingness to release people who have been convicted of violent offenses in order to get innocent children who've been held in a tunnel nearly 50 days ago.
What was terrible is the best parody to put behind this guy speaking now would be violins, like Schindler's List violins, isn't it? Because that's what it's become like. It's become a parody of itself. What happened once to over and over again throughout history to Jewish people is awful, and everybody says, "Oh, it's terrible, it's terrible." But there's a repeated history of, listen, this guy's lying directly to people's faces. The previous generation lied directly to people's faces. The previous generation lied directly to, and so on and so forth. And it's, you know, there's a point where we have to say we are all predisposed in different cultures to act and present certain behaviors and certain manners, and we know that some are antisocial. So people will say, well, what's the difference between an Englishman and a Romanian? What is the difference? Well, to a Welshman, I can tell you they both look the same. but what is the difference? If we're going to get into racial divides and what people are worth, what's the difference? Well, it depends where they're from. Like, if you take the worst council estate kid from, say, Coville in Leicestershire, if you would take the worst council estate kid and you would stick him next to the worst Romanian kid from some Bucharest, outskirts suburbs of Bucharest or something like that, if you were to put them together, they would probably present the same manners, the same human behavior, the same negative human behavior from being taught, brought up, same peeing around the place, smearing, whatever, the worst things you can imagine. Now you take the most high end and you see the same manners as well, because everybody is roughly the same, but our cultures and societies and the way we're brought up and the way we're taught to live our lives make us different, don't they? Very much human beings on the spectrum of shit smearers all the way up to intellectual thinkers. They are all roughly the same in nearly every single country. Nearly every single country has the people who are the worst and the people who are the best. And they all do learn or don't learn or do things that are awful or don't do things that are awful in different ways. But then there are loads of other traits that come from culture, from culture. Now, what we're not allowed to discuss, and this is where I love to discuss, this is what I want to discuss, is how that culture then affects the behavior of entire nations and entire people. And then you define those people by those behaviors, but those behaviors are not from their human, their genetics, it's from their culture. So they do have a superiority complex. We know this. This is obvious. So it's so hard to tiptoe around this crap. But the fact is that the reason why the Jewish people have a superiority complex is because they truly believe they're God's people. And in the same way, you go to the same type of people, the same people in the realms of political Islam as you would in political Israel or political Zionism or political Judaism, whatever you want to call it. If you look and you compare the two together, you discover the same people saying the same things and both have superiority complex because they both believe they're God's people. And then you look around, you look at all the problems in the world that are due to cultures, religions, things that affect a nation state, a people, how they identify. So these Canaanites, one set of Canaanites over here identify as Palestine, one set of Canaanites identify as Israelites. They get brought up in completely different ways. And because of it, they have conflict when it comes into meeting within society. And they both believe that they're superior. So what are you going to get? Both sides fighting. If the Palestinians had the same weapons that the Israelis had, and the Israelis had the same capabilities as the Palestinians, you would still see fighting, wouldn't you? You'd still see them fighting each other. You'd still see them, and you'd see the Palestinians brutalizing the Israelis, and you'd see loads of people saying, that's disgusting, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's the way it is. It's all relative, because it's not about Israel, it's not about Palestine, it's not about all of those, it's about the power dynamics of humans and how culturally things within our specific cultures make us manifest certain behaviors more in one area than another. And I am openly saying that the history have shown that wherever the Israelites do roam, they end up conflicting with people because culturally they do have superiority complex. And it's not the people, the people like the lower down echelons of society, where people are just going to be getting on with their lives and just doing stuff. And yeah, they do the religious stuff, but they just get on with their life. We're talking about the people who believe they're superior and rise to the top because our structures are made in a way that the people who believe they're superior and have the most ego and have the most ability to potentially lie to your face rise to the top. And now we're in this place where we can't openly say, but those people over there act this way and those people act differently. We're not allowed to say that anymore. We're not allowed to say it because it would be racist, etc. But it's true. It's true. Race has implications on the way behavior manifests, but culture has more influence. And mixed together, you see reoccurring themes throughout history. And the reoccurring theme seems to be that eventually there becomes a bloodbath of the Jews. And we all want that to stop. We all want that to stop. And I truly believe it's all about political ideology floating to the top and the willingness. If you've got a home and if you've got a land permanently, you haven't been pushed out of your land once upon a time, and the political ideology rises to the top. That's one thing. But if you're occupying parts of someone else's land and the political ideology rises to the top, that leads to genocide. You have to get rid of the other people. You have to get rid of the competition. The political ideology that is out of control and led by those who believe themselves to be superior nearly always leads to the fall of eugenics and genocide. Every time. We are superior. We are superior. We keep telling ourselves we are superior. Where does that lead? It leads to saying we deserve more. We should have more. We should have more. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. We should be treated differently. We no longer recognize what other people do. We only recognize what we do as being good. Everybody else is bad because they're not us. We are superior. I feel that coming off the whole of the Israeli argument only makes sense if you put that dynamic in place. If you put the superiority complex in place, political Judaism being controlled by people with extreme egos, this is why this makes sense. That's the only way this all makes sense. Everything that's happening only makes sense if the people in charge of Israel believe that they are superior and that they have the right to wipe out these people because they're meaningless. So this guy, and I've taken a long time to explain that. Sorry about that. This guy is telling you how disgusting that thought is. That is true. He knows it. He's wearing the pin. He's there representing on the world stage the people who are occupying the land of a weaker people, because it should be because they're God's people and superiority. You know, look back throughout history. See the people who thought they were the master race. See the people who thought they were God's people. See the people who thought they were the chosen ones. See the people who caused the tragedy based upon an ideology that leads to making more enemies than friends. And more enemies than friends leads to, again, genocide. So this is dangerous games. Dangerous games. I think that if we keep going along this road, we will approach another genocide. We're seeing it now with the Palestinian people. That is a genocide, but we will see something much worse. Whether it will be the Jewish people, whether it be blacks, Arabs, whatever country around, whatever people, we're going to see it because we allow and we tolerate the idea of superiority, and we don't discuss it and we can't talk about it. And this news piece here is insignificant, really, but it's significant when you look at it through a a certain prism and from a certain angle, that this is the manifestation of or you're using the word manifestation quite a lot here, but this is the moment where you're able to see that it's a lie. That the press, the guy who's talking, the guy who's interviewing him, knows all of this. The guy who's speaking knows all of this. This is hypernormalization. They all know this is superiority complex. This is superiority complex.
And to turn that somehow into a narrative of dehumanization against Israel, as if that somehow is a reflection that we are the ones missing a moral compass. Really, I think insinuations like that are outrageous. It is Hamas that devalues lives. It is Hamas that devalues Israeli lives.
Here you go. So it's only the one side. It's only the one side. So why would it only be the one side? If you're thinking it from this point of view, why would it only be the one side? Because you're unable to see the other side. What if you go on the other side? What do you see? Oh, you see that that Hamas only exists because Israelis didn't give credence to Palestinian lives in the first place. And Israel created Hamas in certain ways, by proxy, supporting certain groups so that they could get rid of the socialist-leaning Palestinian organizations during the 80s. And it backfired on them, didn't it? Backfired on them big style. And it is Israeli officials who admit to that. They admit openly, yes, we did that. We supported these guys and it led to this. This is what they do. They've created the devil, and then they point at all of the Palestinian people and call them the devil. That's dangerous stuff. It's past evil.
And Palestinian lives, as we see from the reckless way that they've been trying to use innocent Palestinian civilians as human shields in this war, and as you can see from Israel's efforts to get them out of harm's way so that we can target the monsters who perpetrated that horrific, barbaric massacre on October 7th.
I've been very surprised by a lot of the reaction of certain prominent figures, Gary Lineker, the footballer, former footballer, being one of them, who recently shared a tweet from a prominent left-wing commentator in this country, Owen Jones, which basically was an interview he did with somebody saying that what Israel was engaging in was a textbook genocide.
So wait a minute. Oh my God, this is such an establishment knob-off. So they're like, I was really surprised that Gary Lineker retweeted an Owen Jones. Owen Jones is like, he's, I mean, but he can, at times like this, he can say the truth, and it's officially on his side of the fence, and he's allowed to speak within this stuff, and he's allowed to then say, "Oh, look, this is oh, look, I'm getting kudos for this. I'm getting kudos because it's a textbook genocide. It's a textbook genocide. It is. It is a textbook. We know it's a textbook genocide. Yeah, it's obvious. It is textbook, but." This is just the establishment pointing at the establishment, pointing at the establishment, pointing at the establishment. That's GB News. All I'm saying is establishment linked so much with the army. It's so strange how many of the people on there have like army links and stuff. That's very, very, it makes me very worried about where we're going in the direction, because politicians like Ed Balls and stuff now being in on news channels and stuff as well makes me feel uncomfortable. Makes me feel like the mask has fallen so much that the people who are pretending they're in charge of our country are now speaking directly to our face all the time to try and brainwash us, which is exactly what we're seeing. But this is the GB News establishment pointing at Gary Lineker establishment. I think is he still the highest paid person on the BBC? Still the highest paid? Easy target. So the BBC, the GB News pointing at Gary Lineker, pointing at Owen Jones, pointing at Raz Segal. Oh, it's a jerk off here. It's around in a nice big circle jerk, isn't it? It's just so annoying to behold because it doesn't tell us anything. Owen Jones doesn't tell us anything. And yes, of course it is a genocide, but it does tell us something. It tells us that GB News can't recognize a genocide.
Genocide.
Because the intent is expressed.
What
so
noise was that?
So
what was that?
In such unexpressed.
I was like that. Wait a minute.
So
what was
genocide?
Because the intent is expressed.
Genocide.
Because the intent is.
What was that, Owen Jones? Do it again.
Because the intent is expressed.
What was that? What was that?
Because the intent is expressed. Because the intent is expressed.
Wow, that's amazing.
So explicitly, directly.
I'm sorry. You know I love. God, it looks like drug addiction, doesn't it? I'm not going to say which one looks like drug addiction. You make up for yourself. Can you tell me in the comments which one of these looks like a drug addict? Can you tell me? I bet you can. I bet you can. I'm sorry, but really, let's move it forward. Let's hear that noise again that you make. That's a real special noise. I might take that out and use it in the song. Here we go. Let's listen.
Genocide.
Because the intent is expressed so explicitly, so directly, in such unashamed ways, and it's continued to be expressed in this way.
I shouldn't be laughing because it's about genocide, but still.
In front of our eyes is a textbook case
of drug addiction. Oh, genocide, yeah, sorry. But what was actually wrong with that clip, apart from him saying it was a case of genocide? And genocide being that you want to destroy a people in part or whole. That's and so it's a destruction of a people in part or whole. Same October 7th, that was a terrorist attack that is perpetrated by people who have genocidal intent. And to want to take over someone's land and remove a people and act like they don't exist is genocide, and that's what Israel are clearly doing. So what was wrong with that clip where he says, well, it looks like it's textbook genocide? It's not like it's like an objectionable, oh, he said he was a Zog and that he was a disgusting Jew or something like that. Nothing like that happened. There's no actual racism. There's no example of actual racism there. Or shocking. It's just people criticizing Israel. So GB News are just like helping to push forward this idea that, oh, you know, it's terrible. Look at how their coverage of all this terrible coverage against Israel. But it's just people discussing the fact that genocide is actually happening as it happens.
Nick, of course, works for the BBC as well. I mean, again, what do you make when you see people, prominent people, going out of their way to tweet something like that, under the guise, by the way, of trying to remain neutral? I'm not expressing a view, I'm just...
That's what he's doing, but how do you feel about this guy now expressing the opposite view as though he's just not expressing a view? This is what he's doing. So again, these are the people, this is what they do. They project out exactly what they do.
Saying you should have a look at this.
It's a really outrageous accusation, and I'm torn between wondering whether it's by people who are too stupid to open a dictionary and read the definition, or a question of projection. Because an act of genocide did take place on October 7th, when Hamas death squads invaded southern Israel and murdered everyone they saw as brutally as possible, when they burned people, beheaded people, tortured them, mutilated them, parents in front of their children, children in front of their parents, when they committed acts of...
This is the problem. I'm listening to this, and all I'm thinking is he talking about the Israelis over the past 75 years, or is he talking about the Palestinians and Hamas and all of the stuff that's come from the other side? What's he talking about? Because his side has done that more than anybody else in the history of that modern history of that region. There was no one else who has persecuted the people around in the area as much as these guys have done since 1948. It's gone on over and over again. Still happening. We'll watch it happening over 75 years of them doing this. And then at the end of it, when you see a reaction, it's like, well, this is terrible, and you should feel angry about this. So feel angry about it, but feel angry about it when anybody does it.
Barbaric rape That was a campaign of systematic extermination by Hamas's army of terror, which tells us that it wants to perpetrate.
It wasn't right. Extermination means to get rid of everybody. Yeah, that's what he's saying. But they went in for a terror attack. So it was about murder. It was about terrorism, about exterminating a very small amount of people, because there's no way they would be able to kill everybody, is there? That's not the way it works. It didn't systematically go to exterminate everyone. Again, what's he doing? He's evoking your memories. He's evoking your feelings. He's evoking your thoughts of a past, of a genocide, of a Holocaust, of the extermination of an entire people, of his people. He's evoking that inside you. But it's not true. It was a terrorist attack in response to occupation. We know what that was. It was brutal, horrible. Everything inside it was horrible. That's what happens when you occupy someone's land and they resist. You end up with a load of horrible outbursts of violence. That is what happens. If you don't want that to happen, you've got to stop occupying people's land and go a route of peace. Not go the route that when something like that happens, you kill 10,000 people, 3,000 children, and you act like you're the victims. That you're no longer the victims. Once you've killed more people than the other side, you're no longer the victims by far. You become the beheaders. You become so what's the difference between beheading someone and then burning to death painfully in their house because it's been hit by a missile? What is the difference between that? What is the difference? Again, it all ends up in the relative, the same thing. So if you're doing the same thing to the people who you're complaining about what they're doing to you, you're as bad as that person. You're as bad as those people. This is what we're seeing.
October 7th, and another October 7th, and a million October 7ths, as many as it takes to murder every man, woman, child in our country. And in response to
that's not what we've seen. No, that's not what we've seen. So he's saying that that's not what we've seen. This is an outburst that happens very rarely, and it was bound to happen at some point. It was going to give, because they're blockading an entire people, they're occupying an entire land, they're torturing the people of Gaza and have done for many years. And so you're always going to see this. So they can predict this, and then they can predict what they say. So they train up these guys for when it comes to the point when they need to say it.
Target the monsters who did that, going blue in the face, trying to get civilians out of harm's way, despite Hamas's efforts to embed itself in civilian areas in clear violation of humanitarian law.
What? Hey, come on. Embedding themselves into civilian areas. What, like settlers do. And then attack the people around so they can push people out. That's what's happening all of the time, isn't it? That's what's the people of Palestine and Gaza have to put up with all of the time, is being harassed all of the time. What happens eventually? When you push a button over and over again and the button says exploding human beings, what do you think eventually will happen?
So to take the suffering and the trauma that we have suffered, the deadliest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
But then, he's ignoring the Palestinians. He's ignoring them. He's ignoring all of those dead people. He just doesn't even think about them. And he's talking about how, that they would be comparing the two. He's not even thinking about, it's all about Israel. He's not thinking about the fact of all of the dead Palestinians. Of course he's not.
And to somehow turn that against us and turn us into the villains really shows an atrocious degree of total moral bankruptcy.
Talking about moral bankruptcy, what about that GBNews, eh? Morally bankrupt. It started off morally bankrupt. This is like the pasty news network. This is really one of the gifts that keeps on giving, like Times Radio. They are what the future of authoritarianism looks like.
Young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, certainly penetrates the cabinets.